Her daughter-in-law sat her at the kids' table, plastic tray, smiley potatoes, and all. Jude Hensley, retired counselor and homeowner, didn't protest. Stacy raised her wine glass, called it our home, and moved on like Jude was decoration. By New Year's Day, the locks were changed, the deed refiled, and Jude's seat, at the table and under the roof, was hers again. They served her nuggets in silence. She served them 30 days' notice. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The smell of roasted turkey drifted through every corner of the old farmhouse, sweetened by cinnamon candles and the faint crackle of a fireplace that had seen 50 Thanksgivings before this one. Outside, Lexington's autumn leaned toward winter, gray clouds settling low over gold leaves. Inside, laughter swelled like it belonged to someone else's house. Jude Hensley adjusted the silver pin on her blazer before stepping from the hallway into her own dining room, a room she still paid the taxes on, though her son and daughter-in-law liked to pretend otherwise. The long maple table gleamed under amber light. Place cards dotted the cloth. Mark, Stacy, Ruby, Ben, Uncle Cal, Aunt Terry. Each name written in looping gold script. She scanned for hers. There wasn't one. "Hey, Mom." Mark waved from the head of the table. His smile came fast, nervous, the kind of grin that tried to bridge something it had no planks for. "Glad you made it in time." "I live here," Jude said lightly, smoothing the cuff of her jacket. Stacy appeared from the kitchen, wineglass in hand, wearing a cranberry-colored dress a shade too loud for the room. "Oh, Jude, we thought you'd be more comfortable over there." She gestured toward the corner near the patio doors. A smaller fold-up table stood there, bright plastic plates, colorful napkins, paper turkeys glued to the centerpiece. The kids' table. One empty chair waited among the booster seats. Jude blinked once, then again. "Over there?" Stacy smiled, wide and brittle. "You know, easier for you to chat with the little ones. Less noise, less crowd." She tilted her head like it was a kindness. "And look, we even made it fun." On the plate sat a sectioned plastic tray, the kind with cartoon dividers, and inside, chicken nuggets, a scoop of corn, and a smiley-faced dollop of mashed potatoes. A few cousins tried not to stare. Someone coughed into a napkin. Ruby's face turned red, eyes darting between her mother and grandmother. Jude's pulse slowed, not quickened. Years of counseling other people's children had trained her for moments like this, the kind that revealed who people really were when they thought no one would remember. She smiled. "How thoughtful," she said softly and walked over. Her heels clicked against the hardwood like a metronome. Ruby shifted in her seat, whispering to her brother, but Ben just kept watching his grandmother, wide-eyed. Jude pulled out the plastic chair, the legs squealing against the floor, and sat down. She placed a linen napkin on her lap, her own, not the paper ones. "This looks colorful." Mark stood frozen near the carving board, carving knife in hand. "Stacy, maybe." But Stacy was already raising her glass. "Before we eat, I just want to say how thankful I am for family. For stability. For having a home where we can all gather and feel safe." Jude tilted her head. A home where we can all gather. Her fingers brushed the rim of the tray, warm plastic, cheap and hollow. Everyone laughed politely and chairs creaked as people began to serve themselves. The room filled with the sound of scraping utensils and murmured conversation, the performance of harmony. Ruby leaned over from the main table, voice small. "Grandma, do you want some of my turkey?" Jude looked at her granddaughter, saw the kindness her own son had once had before it got talked over. "No, baby," she said, her voice gentle. "I'm getting full." Cynthia, her oldest friend, sat across the room beside Aunt Terry, raising an eyebrow that asked a dozen questions at once. From behind her wine glass, Cynthia mouthed, "You good?" Jude's lips barely moved. "I'm full of ideas." Dinner clattered on. Stacy performed the part of the perfect hostess, laughing too loudly at every joke, correcting the kids when they spoke too freely. Mark stayed quiet, his focus on cutting meat into pieces small enough for guilt to swallow. When dessert arrived, Stacy made sure to drop off Jude's slice herself. Pumpkin pie, but smaller, served on a paper plate instead of ceramic. "Wouldn't want to weigh you down," Stacy quipped, sugar in her voice, malice under it. Jude nodded slowly. "Wouldn't dream of it." She took a small bite, savoring the cinnamon. The taste was fine, but she'd long learned the flavor of condescension was stronger. When the table emptied for coffee and football, she stayed seated, watching the reflection of the house lights in the patio glass. Her name wasn't anywhere on the table, but her initials were carved in the window frame, hidden beneath the curtain, JH, from the year the house was built. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, tugging at the last of the orange leaves. Inside, laughter echoed from the living room like it came from another lifetime. Jude smiled faintly, slid the plastic tray a few inches forward, and whispered to herself, "Enjoy it while you can." Because in that moment, quiet, humiliated, and overlooked, something settled inside her. Not bitterness, not even anger, just decision. The laughter rolled on like background music Jude hadn't chosen. She sliced a nugget in half with quiet precision, the dull plastic knife bending beneath her hand. Around her, the room swelled with motion, chairs scraping, plates passed, stories told louder than necessary. The smell of gravy and wine thickened the air, but where she sat, the air felt cooler, like the corner had pulled away from the warmth. From the big table, Ruby's voice floated over the noise. "Grandma, do you want some of my turkey?" Jude looked up, meeting her granddaughter's hopeful eyes. The girl's small hand hovered over her plate, holding a perfect slice, real turkey, real silver fork. For a heartbeat, Jude almost accepted. Almost. But she saw Stacy glance their way, that reflexive smirk tugging at her lips. She smiled at Ruby instead. "No, baby, I'm getting full." Ruby frowned but nodded, quietly spearing another bite. Jude turned her attention back to her tray. She ate slowly, deliberately, refusing to let her movements betray the tremor building in her chest. Each bite was a small act of control. Around her, the sound of glasses clinking and conversation about mortgage rates and school fundraisers hummed like static. From across the room, her phone buzzed on the edge of the windowsill. One vibration, brief but purposeful. She reached for it, shielding the screen with her hand. "Cynthia." "That woman's bold. You good?" Jude's thumb hovered for a moment. Then she typed, careful and measured. "Jude, I'm full of ideas." She slid the phone face down, feeling her pulse settle. Across the table, Cynthia caught her eye and gave a single nod. Not pity, but understanding. Jude brushed a few crumbs from her lap and looked out the patio doors. Beyond the glass, the yard glowed faintly under porch light. Bare trees, rusted swing set, the garden she'd planted 30 years ago. She remembered the day she'd chosen the soil herself, the feel of it between her fingers. Back when the house had been full of laughter that was hers. Now her own laughter sounded foreign even in her memory. "Mark," Stacy said, raising her glass with a theatrical flick of her wrist. "You carved that turkey perfectly this year." She turned her grin to the table. "You all know how thankful I am for this. For stability. For family. For this beautiful home we've built together." Her voice hit that last word hard, like ownership was a weapon. Mark smiled weakly, but Jude noticed how his eyes darted to her. Just once, then away. He knew. He always knew. Jude dabbed at the corner of her mouth with her napkin. "You've certainly made it your own," she said softly. Exactly, Stacy chirped, missing the undertone. Feels like we're finally settled, doesn't it? Jude's smile never wavered. Though inside she felt the click of something final, like a key turning in an invisible lock. As the others began clearing dishes, Stacy waved a manicured hand. Oh, don't worry about the kids' table, Jude. We'll handle it. Jude set down her fork. Of course you will, she said, voice light, polite. Then she reached for her tray, stacking the plastic utensils neatly on top. Old habits, neatness, order, control. Ruby came by to hug her goodbye before dessert. I'm sorry, Grandma, she whispered, too soft for anyone else to hear. Mom just... Jude smoothed the girl's hair. Don't worry, sweetheart. People show who they are when they think no one's watching. Ruby nodded, confused but trusting. When the house began to shift toward football and wine refills, Jude lingered a moment longer in her chair. The din of conversation faded, as if someone were slowly turning down the volume on a TV show she no longer needed to watch. Her gaze drifted again to the big table. The centerpiece, golden leaves, fake pumpkins, and a candle shaped like a house, flickered softly. Stacy laughed too loudly at something Mark said, though his eyes didn't smile back. Jude rose, smoothing her blazer. She picked up the plastic tray and carried it to the sink herself. The water ran warm over her hands, and for a moment she stood there, watching it swirl down the drain. She could almost hear the words forming behind her reflection in the window. This is still your home. She dried her hands, turned off the faucet, and glanced once more toward the living room, where her name wasn't mentioned, where the house she built had become their stage. Her phone buzzed again on the counter. Cynthia. You still good? Jude typed only 2 words before slipping it into her pocket. Jude. Better tomorrow. The night after Thanksgiving felt hollow, like the house itself was holding its breath. The scent of turkey still clung to the drapes, but underneath it was something sharper. The ghost of humiliation that refused to air out. Jude sat at her kitchen table, the same table she'd bought the year Mark turned 10, when the house had been full of homework papers and cereal bowls. Now, the hum of the refrigerator was her only company. Her blazer hung neatly over the chair beside her. Her lipstick, still perfect, had outlasted the family civility. She stared at her phone. One unread text from Cynthia blinked on the screen. Need me to come over? Jude typed back, bring the folder. When Cynthia arrived 20 minutes later, she didn't bother knocking. She'd known Jude long enough to let herself in. You're sure about this? She asked, closing the door behind her with a soft click. I'm not sure about much these days, Jude said, pushing back from the table. But I'm sure about respect, and who this roof really belongs to. She crossed the room to the tall oak cabinet by the hall, opening the lowest drawer. Inside, a small gray fireproof box sat among tax envelopes and old photo negatives. Her hands were steady as she lifted it out and set it on the counter. The combination lock clicked open on the first try. Inside were the paper ghosts of her life, insurance forms, retirement letters, the deed she hadn't looked at in years. She unfolded it carefully, the paper crisp and yellowed around the edges. Her name gleamed alone at the top. Judith A. Hensley, sole owner. No co-signers, no addendums, just her. Cynthia peered over her shoulder. Well, she said with a slow grin. Would you look at that? No joint ownership, no transfer filings, clean as church glass. Jude ran her finger down the page, tracing the date like a scar she hadn't realized still showed. I let them move in when Mark lost that first job. Just for a year, he said. That was 6 years ago. Cynthia opened her tote bag, pulling out a stack of blank legal forms. So what are we calling this? Closure, Jude said. 30 days notice, no violations, no late rent, just no respect. The sound of the printer warming up filled the quiet. Jude sat, pen poised. Effective January 1st, she said, her voice as even as a signature line. Cynthia nodded approvingly. New year. New locks. They both laughed. Low, tired. The kind of laugh that comes after a long storm when the power finally flicks back on. Jude took her time writing it. The words came easier than she expected. Clear. Factual. Unemotional. Notice of termination of tenancy. She dated it November 30th. At the bottom, she signed her name in dark blue ink, pressing hard enough for the pen to leave an impression on the next sheet. Cynthia watched her, then said softly, "You know, this'll break him a little." Jude paused, pen still in hand. "Maybe it'll teach him something first." The printer whirred again. One copy for them, one for the county clerk. When it finished, Jude stacked the papers neatly, aligning the corners, pressing out every wrinkle. Old habits again. 2 envelopes, she murmured. One to deliver, one to keep. Cynthia slid them across the table. "You're scary when you're this calm, you know that." "I'm retired, not dead." Jude smiled faintly. If they wanted a landlord without a spine, they should have rented from Zillow. Cynthia grinned, standing to grab her coat. "I'll prep the change order for the locks. January 2nd delivery. Gives them time to vacate, and you time to breathe." "Breathe," Jude repeated. The word felt foreign in her mouth, like it belonged to someone lighter. She walked Cynthia to the door, pausing in the foyer. The photo wall caught her eye. Family portraits taken through the years. In every one, Stacy was near the center. Jude's frame was always off to the side, blurred or cropped. "I built this house," she said quietly, half to herself. "I know," Cynthia said, "and now you're taking it back." The front door shut softly behind her friend. Jude turned off the kitchen light, leaving only the faint glow from the hallway. She picked up the 2 envelopes, their weight surprisingly heavy in her hands, the kind of heavy that meant finality, not guilt. She tucked them into her purse, zipped it shut, and whispered to the empty room, "Let's see how they like a table with no seat for them." The next morning broke cold and brittle, the kind of Kentucky morning that looked gentle from the window, but cut through a coat the second you stepped outside. Frost glittered across Jude's front steps as she locked her condo door behind her, a manila envelope tucked neatly under her arm. She'd dressed sharply, charcoal slacks, navy sweater, pearl earrings, not out of vanity, but out of ceremony. If she was going to reclaim her dignity, she'd do it with the same precision she used to guide her students through college essays and heartbreaks. Calm, direct, no tears, no tremor. The drive to her own house was only 15 minutes, but it felt longer this time, each turn of the road another chapter closing. The neighborhood was already alive with weekend noise, someone scraping ice off a windshield, a dog barking through a fence. When she pulled into the driveway, the sight of her house, her porch, her shutters, her mailbox still reading the Hensleys, made something hot flicker in her chest. Not rage, resolve. She parked at the curb, cut the engine, and took a breath that clouded in the air before her. "Let's do this, Judy," she murmured, stepping out. Her heels crunched against frozen leaves as she walked up the familiar path. The curtains in the front window fluttered. Someone was awake. The door opened halfway before she even knocked. Stacy stood there, robe belted tight, hair up in a lopsided bun. A mug of coffee steamed in her hand. "Jude," she said, blinking, her tone cautious but clipped. "What are you doing here so early?" Jude held out the manila envelope. "Just dropping something off." Stacy took it, confusion wrinkling her forehead. "What's this?" "Official notice," Jude said evenly. "Lease ends December 31st. You have 30 days to vacate." The words landed with the same clean authority she'd once used in a principal's office. Stacy laughed, sharp, disbelieving. "I'm sorry, what? Is this She flipped the pages open. Is this a joke? Not even a little, Jude said. Her tone was almost kind. You'll find the details in writing. Everything's by the book. The front door swung wider as Mark appeared behind Stacy, still in his t-shirt and flannel pajama pants, hair sticking up in uncertain directions. He looked from his wife to his mother, confusion dawning like slow light. Mom? Seriously? His voice carried that old, helpless tone, the one that used to make her want to fix things for him. But not today. Jude met his eyes. Y'all served me a toddler tray, she said, steady as a sermon. I'm serving you independence. Stacy's jaw dropped. You can't evict family. Jude tilted her head, her expression calm. I'm not evicting family, dear. I'm evicting tenants. Stacy's hand tightened around the coffee mug. You're really going to do this? Before Christmas? I didn't pick the timing, Jude replied, sliding her gloves back on. You did that when you decided my place card belonged at the kids' table. Mark ran a hand over his face. Mom, come on, we were just joking. I was there, she interrupted gently. I know what it was. For a moment, the three of them stood in the open doorway, the house's warmth spilling into the cold air like a secret leaking out. Behind them, the smell of coffee and last night's leftovers lingered. Jude could see the faint shadow of the kids' art on the fridge. Her grandkids' drawings, her handwriting on old grocery lists still taped beside them. Mom, Mark said again, softer this time, like he was 12 years old and caught lying. Where are we supposed to go? You'll figure it out, she said. You're resourceful. You learned from me, remember? Stacy scoffed, disbelief cracking into anger. You're unbelievable. No, Jude said quietly. I'm just done being invisible. She turned to leave, her heels clicking down the porch steps with the same measured rhythm she'd arrived with. The air bit at her cheeks, but she didn't mind. Frost crunched beneath her, steady, final. Behind her, she heard the door slam, followed by muffled voices, Mark's low and defeated, Stacy's sharp and rising. She didn't turn around. Halfway down the walkway, her phone buzzed. A text from Cynthia lit the screen. Delivered? Jude typed back, thumb sure and still. Served. She slipped the phone into her coat pocket and looked up at the sky. Soft gray clouds, the faint promise of snow again. By noon, the quiet Jude had earned that morning was gone. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing, calls, texts, notifications piling up like snowdrifts. At first, she thought something had happened to Ruby or Ben. Then she saw the first message, Nancy from next door. Jude, are you okay? Just saw Stacy's post. That can't be right, can it? Then another. Marlene from the HOA. If you need help mediating this, I'm happy to step in. And another, with a screenshot attached. The post filled the screen in Stacy's perfectly curated font and tone, a faux earnest essay framed in sadness and self-righteousness. Nothing says Christmas like being kicked out by your own family. Some people think age gives them the right to destroy others' holidays. We've done nothing wrong, except try to make a home for our kids. Please pray for us as we figure out what to do next. Family matters. Heartbroken on Christmas without compassion. Underneath, 3 crying emojis, a photo of the house dusted in frost, and a comment section already blooming like mold. Lord help me, Jude muttered, setting her coffee down. Cynthia called almost immediately. You've seen it? I've seen it. She tagged half the county, even the pastor. I figured she'd go public, Jude said calmly. Just not this fast. Through the speaker, Cynthia exhaled. You still want to keep this clean and legal, right? Jude's voice didn't waver. Of course, clean, legal, but not quiet. She hung up before emotion could crawl into her tone. By mid-afternoon, the fallout had begun. Old acquaintances messaged Jude with half-baked sympathy. One even dropped off a pie with a note. "We're all praying for forgiveness this Christmas." Forgiveness? For what? For owning her own property? At 3 o'clock, Ruby showed up on Jude's doorstep, her backpack still slung over one shoulder. She looked small, older somehow, like the week had aged her. "Grandma?" she asked, voice soft. "Mom's freaking out." Jude knelt down a little, brushing the girl's sleeve. "I figured as much. She's yelling all the time. Dad's not talking to her. She keeps saying you ruined Christmas." Ruby hesitated. "Did you?" Jude smiled, weary but warm. "No, sweetheart. I just reminded them whose house Christmas happens in." Ruby bit her lip, torn between loyalty and love. "She said you're being mean." "Well," Jude said, "if mean means making people clean up their mess, then maybe I am." She touched Ruby's cheek gently. "Don't you worry about the adults, okay? You just keep being kind. That's your job." Ruby nodded. Her eyes flicked to the table where the manila envelope still sat beside Jude's coffee cup, now empty but neatly rinsed. "She said you won't change your mind." "That part's true." Jude walked her to the door, kissed her forehead, and watched her disappear down the sidewalk. Then, as the screen door clicked shut, she pulled out her phone and opened a message to Cynthia. "Jude, prepare lock change for New Year's Day." Cynthia, "You sure you don't want to wait until they're out?" Jude, "They'll be out, one way or another." An hour later, another buzz. This time from a number that made her chest tighten for just a second. "Mark, can we talk?" "Not with her. Just you and me." She stared at the message. Once upon a time, those words would have cracked her resolve. Just you and me. Like when he was a boy, afraid to tell his father he'd dented the car. But now, she could see the pattern too clearly. Every peace talk ended with her giving ground, every apology scripted to soften the next offense. Her reply came slow, deliberate. "Jude, I'll see you at the county clerk's office. Bring ID." She hit send and set the phone face down. Outside, dusk was spreading fast. The wind had picked up, pushing dry leaves against the porch in small, frantic piles. The house across the street had already put up lights, bright red and gold, garish against the gray sky. She could almost imagine Stacy watching from the living room, stewing in self-made victimhood, refreshing her own post to count the comments. The thought didn't bring Jude pleasure, just clarity. Her phone buzzed again. A new text, this one from an unknown number. "Unknown. You heartless woman. It's Christmas." Jude stared at it, thumb hovering, then deleted the message without a word. She poured herself another coffee instead. Black, strong, the way she liked it before life got noisy. The mug felt warm between her palms as she stood by the window, watching the faint reflection of herself in the glass. The house looked smaller from out here, but somehow she felt larger within it. By Saturday morning, the whole of Lexington might have heard about the Hensley eviction. Jude didn't need to check social media to know. The silence around her was proof enough. The phone had stopped buzzing. The neighbors had stopped checking in. And even Cynthia had texted just 3 words, "They're coming today." Jude didn't bother asking how she knew. Cynthia always knew. The knock came at 9:12 a.m. Sharp, quick, and too polite to be sincere. Jude took one last sip of her coffee before opening the door. Mark stood on the step, shoulders slumped, his winter coat zipped all the way up even though the air was mild. Stacy hovered beside him, wrapped in a plaid scarf and oversized sunglasses that didn't belong to the season or the truth. "Morning," Jude said, holding the door steady. "Mom," Mark started, voice soft, "can we—" Stacy pushed past him with a brittle smile. "We just need to talk." Jude stepped aside, letting them in. "By all means." The condo was warm and spare, every item in its place. Framed photos of Ruby and Ben, a vase of white tulips, the faint smell of lemon polish. Stacy's eyes darted around like she was scanning for ammunition. "I didn't mean for things to blow up like this," she said quickly, removing her sunglasses and blinking hard, summoning the sheen of tears. "The post got out of hand. People twisted my words. We never meant to hurt you." Jude clasped her hands together. "No? You just meant to humiliate me in my own dining room?" Mark stepped in before Stacy could answer. "Mom, she didn't mean it that way. You know how social media is. It's just, people love drama." Jude regarded him coolly. "And you? You didn't mean it either, I suppose." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're really not going to let us explain?" "Oh, you're explaining plenty." She crossed to the coffee table, lifted a thin folder, and handed it to Stacy. "This is your signed lease copy, the same one you never bothered to read, apparently." Stacy hesitated, hands trembling slightly as she accepted it. "Why are you doing this? You're sabotaging your own family." Jude's tone was calm, unshakable. "You demoted me from it last Thursday. That landed." Mark flinched. Stacy's face went tight. "Mom," he said again, quieter now. "This isn't you." Jude raised an eyebrow. "You think I'm too old to remember who I am?" "No, Son," she interrupted gently. "I've spent my life teaching other people how to find their backbone. I'd be a hypocrite not to use mine." For a moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the heater and the muffled whine of a lawnmower somewhere down the street. Stacy sniffed dramatically, pulling a tissue from her sleeve. "Fine, we'll move. Just not by Christmas. The kids." Jude shook her head. "The law says 30 days. And I don't recall the law pausing for the holidays." Mark looked stricken. "You'd really put us out like this?" "I'm not putting you out," she said softly. "You put me out. You just didn't notice it until the tables turned." Stacy's fake tears dried fast. "You know what? You're unbelievable. You sit there acting righteous, but you're just bitter. That's what this is. Some sad old lady power trip." Jude tilted her head, studying her. "You should write that down for your next Facebook post." Before Stacy could retort, a brisk knock came at the door. Jude opened it to find Cynthia standing there, scarf tucked neatly into her coat, carrying a small cardboard box. "Morning," Cynthia said cheerfully, stepping past Stacy like she wasn't there. "Brought that lockbox you asked for." Jude took it with a smile. "Perfect timing." Cynthia glanced around, sensing the tension. "Oh," she said dryly. "Company." Mark managed a polite nod. "Hey, Miss Ross." Cynthia smiled sweetly. "Always nice to see former tenants." Stacy inhaled sharply. "Former?" Jude didn't flinch. "Effective January 1st. Mark looked from his mother to Cynthia, realization dawning in his face. "You're serious about changing the locks." "Serious as frostbite," Cynthia said before Jude could answer. Jude set the box on the counter and folded her arms. "You'll get your legal 30 days, Mark. Not a minute more. I suggest you start packing the things you actually paid for." The color drained from Stacy's face. She looked at Mark as though willing him to fix it, but there was nothing left for him to fix. "Come on," she hissed finally, jerking his sleeve. "We're wasting our time." They left without another word. The door clicked shut behind them. Silence returned, clean and light as the morning air. Cynthia looked at Jude, eyes bright with approval. "You handled that like a CEO firing 2 interns." Jude exhaled, finally letting the tension leave her shoulders. "I've had plenty of practice dealing with entitled behavior." Cynthia grinned. "You think they'll try to talk you out of it again?" Jude glanced toward the window, where the faint outline of their SUV was backing out of the driveway. "Oh, I'm counting on it." Jude woke early Sunday morning to a silence that felt earned, the kind that didn't ask for explanation. The condo smelled faintly of coffee and lemon polish, and a golden line of winter sunlight crawled across the floorboards. She carried her mug to the doorway of the spare bedroom and stood there a long time. The space was clean, neat, and hollow. A guest room used only for company polite enough to stay a single night. A generic space, too quiet to have meaning. Not anymore. She rolled up her sleeves. The first thing she did was strip the bed. Crisp white sheets replaced with soft lavender ones, the kind Ruby always admired when they went shopping. Next, she opened the closet and cleared the bottom shelf, sliding aside old boxes of photographs and retirement files. Into that space, she placed a small bin labeled in tidy black ink. For Ruby. The sound of each fold, each drawer closed, felt like punctuation to a decision already made. By noon, the room had softened. Jude hung a string of warm fairy lights around the window frame, their glow gentle and steady. A stack of children's novels sat on the nightstand. Charlotte's Web, Anne of Green Gables, and a few Nancy Drew mysteries she'd kept from her teaching days. She added a small lamp with a floral shade, then took a step back, hands on her hips. It looked less like a guest room now, and more like a promise. Finally, from the closet, she retrieved the little hand-painted wooden sign Ruby had made at a craft fair 2 summers ago, the one Stacy had dismissed as too childish for the living room. The paint was chipped along the edge, the letters uneven but proud. Ruby's room. Jude hung it carefully on the door. She stood there a moment, reading the words aloud in her head, tasting the quiet satisfaction of them. That afternoon, as the sky began to dim, she got a text. Ruby. Grandma, can I come over to study? Jude. Of course, sweetheart. Bring your math. The doorbell rang half an hour later. Ruby stood there, backpack slung over one shoulder, cheeks pink from the cold. Her eyes darted nervously past Jude, as if checking whether her mother might somehow appear behind her. Jude smiled gently. You're safe here, honey. Always. Ruby stepped inside, kicking off her shoes. Mom thinks I'm at Emma's. Then I suppose we'll make good use of that study time. They settled for a few minutes at the kitchen table, papers spread out, cocoa steaming between them. Ruby tried to focus on her equations, but Jude could tell her mind was somewhere else. Every few minutes, she'd glance toward the hallway, curious. Finally, Jude set her pen down. Come with me a second. Ruby followed her down the short hall. When Jude opened the door, the soft glow of the fairy lights spilled out into the corridor. Ruby froze. Her mouth fell open just slightly. The bed was made up with lavender sheets, a fuzzy blanket at the foot. The books sat stacked neatly beside a ceramic owl lamp, and on the wall above the headboard hung a framed photo. The two of them at the pumpkin patch last fall, faces squinting against the wind, both mid-laugh. Ruby whispered, Is this for me? Jude nodded. For peace. For now. For always. The girl stepped inside slowly, touching the bedspread like she was afraid it might vanish. Grandma, it's perfect. Jude smiled. You deserve a space that feels like yours. Ruby turned, eyes bright but conflicted. Don't tell Mom yet, okay? Jude's voice softened. Your secret's safe with me. Ruby grinned. A small, unguarded grin that made her look her age again, then sat on the edge of the bed and opened her math book. But after a moment she closed it and looked up. Grandma? Yes, baby. I like it better here. Jude's heart clenched, but she kept her expression gentle. That's because it's quiet. Quiet lets you think. Ruby nodded, then went back to her homework. As the evening deepened and the fairy lights blinked softly in the dark, Jude sat in the doorway, watching her granddaughter's pencil move across the page. By Monday morning, Jude's name had traveled farther than her own voice ever could. Family members she hadn't spoken to since the Obama administration were suddenly remembering her number. It started with a voicemail from Stacy's sister, Carla, syrupy sweet, the kind of tone people use when they're buttering toast before a burn. "Hey Jude, it's been forever. I just heard what's going on. Wow, I mean, kicking them out right before Christmas? You must be under a lot of stress. Maybe we can talk about..." Click. Then came Aunt Lorraine from Louisville, her voice already wound up tight. "You can't just put your own son and grandkids out in the cold, Jude. You'll regret this. Family is family." Click. By the time the third call came, some cousin she barely remembered who opened with, "Hey, Miss Landlord Claus." Jude had stopped answering entirely. Instead, she made coffee. Black, strong, deliberate. She sat at her dining table, the same spot where she'd drafted the lease termination, and opened her laptop. An email pinged. From Cynthia, of course. The subject line read, "PR strategy, because we're apparently viral." Jude clicked it open. Draft attached. Frequently asked questions about evictions caused by disrespect. Figured it'd save you time explaining to relatives with short memories. Attached was a one-page document styled like a brochure. FAQ: Why my grown children are moving out. 1. Did they pay rent on time? Yes, but rent doesn't include decency. 2. Could this have been handled privately? It was, until someone went public on Facebook. 3. Why now during the holidays? Because disrespect doesn't take holidays off. 4. Aren't you afraid this will divide the family? The divide already existed. I just stopped setting the table for it. Jude read it twice, smiled, and hit print. By lunchtime, another wave rolled in. Group texts, messy and emotional. Carla: "We're just trying to understand." Jude: "Aunt Lorraine, no one deserves this kind of punishment." Stacy's cousin Tiff: "Girl, this is bad optics. For all of us." Jude sipped her coffee, unbothered. Then she opened her email, attached the official notice and timeline, including her signature, the court date, and the clean legality of it, and hit forward all. Subject line: "For clarity." Within an hour, the replies went quiet. Cynthia called, laughing so hard she could barely speak. "You just nuked a family pity party in under 5 minutes." "They came to me with gossip," Jude said, folding the printed FAQ neatly in half. "I gave them documentation." "Well," Cynthia said, "if I ever get put on trial for having standards, I want you as my defense attorney." "Sweetheart," Jude replied, "I'd just send the evidence and let them choke on it." That night, Jude sat in her living room with a book open and her phone face down on the armrest. She wasn't reading, not really. She was listening. Listening to the silence that follows when people realize their narrative doesn't hold. Around 8, the first voicemail came in. "Jude, it's Carla again. We didn't know the whole story. Stacy left that part out. I'm so sorry." Then another. "Hey, Aunt Jude, this is Tiff. That post made it sound different. We love you, okay? Don't stress." A third. Then a fourth. By the fifth apology, Jude's inbox looked like a digital confessional booth. She deleted them all. No response. No justification. Just the quiet satisfaction of not needing to explain herself to anyone anymore. Around 10, she stepped out onto her balcony. The Lexington night was cold, sharp, and honest. The wind carried faint sounds of holiday music from a neighbor's radio, muffled carols about forgiveness and home. Her gaze lifted toward the soft light glowing through the curtain of the spare bedroom. Ruby's room. That warmth was what she was protecting. Not pride, not power. Peace. She stood there a while, arms folded, eyes on the window. A single snowflake landed on the railing, perfect and temporary. Her phone buzzed again inside. A new notification. She didn't have to check to know who it was. Stacy, in a new post. It's sad when some people value property more than people. Jude smiled faintly at the night sky. Funny, she murmured. That's exactly what she's been doing. The Fayette County rental court smelled faintly of old carpet and burnt coffee, the kind of place where stories came to die in paperwork. Jude had been there before, years ago, as a witness for a friend's eviction hearing. Back then, she'd pitied the tenants who stood trembling before the clerk. Now she was the one being accused, by her own son. She sat straight in her navy coat, her purse resting neatly on her lap. Cynthia sat beside her, reading over the paperwork one last time, a red pen in hand for flair, not need. Across the aisle, Mark and Stacy whispered frantically. Stacy wore too much perfume and not enough shame. Mark looked hollow-eyed, like a man dragged between loyalties and losing both. Their lawyer, a young man with a shiny tie and no idea what he'd walked into, flipped nervously through a folder. Case number 2384, Hensley versus Hensley, called the clerk. Darnell Coates, the same clerk who'd once helped Jude file her property renewal, presided today, glasses low on his nose, expression unreadable but amused. Family dispute? He asked, peering over the bench. Unfortunately, Jude said calmly. Tragic, Darnell muttered, sipping coffee. Proceed. Stacy's lawyer started first. Your Honor, my clients have been subjected to severe emotional distress by a sudden and, he squinted at his notes, misguided act of retaliation by Mrs. Judith Hensley, who is, advanced in years and perhaps not fully aware of the hardship this action creates. Jude's eyebrow arched. Advanced in years, Cynthia whispered. He's about to learn what advanced looks like. The lawyer continued. There was no proper cause for eviction. This is a misunderstanding, driven by, well, family dynamics rather than legal grounds. Mark shifted in his chair, eyes fixed on the floor. Stacy clutched a tissue and began dabbing at eyes that were suspiciously dry. We were blindsided, Your Honor, she said, voice trembling on cue. She's kicking us out over a dinner mishap. It's not right. It's not what Christmas is about. Darnell leaned back. A dinner mishap? Jude reached calmly into her bag. Would you like to see the mishap, Mr. Coates? He motioned with his pen. Please do. She slid a photograph across the table, printed on glossy paper, timestamp visible. The kids' table, the plastic tray, the nuggets, the missing place card. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Jude spoke evenly. This is the seat I was assigned to in my own home on Thanksgiving Day, the home they rent from me. I was served a section toddler tray, while my daughter-in-law gave a speech about stability and gratitude. Darnell adjusted his glasses, squinting at the picture. Then it's Stacy. That's real? Stacy's voice cracked. It was a joke. Jude pulled out another paper, the lease. This document, signed by both of them, clearly outlines a 30-day termination clause. No violations required, just notice, which I delivered, legally. Cynthia placed the deed beside it like a mic drop. And this one, she added sweetly, proves sole ownership. Darnell skimmed both documents, then looked up with the expression of a man watching a slow-motion car wreck. So, let me get this straight. You humiliated your landlord, who is also your mother, during Thanksgiving, and now you're suing her for enforcing a legal lease? Mark opened his mouth. It's not about that, it's... Darnell held up a hand. Son, stop while you still sound human. The courtroom chuckled softly. Cynthia leaned toward Jude. He's warming up to you. Darnell tapped his pen on the desk. Mrs. Hensley, your paperwork is clean. Your notice is valid. And your reason... He looked at the photo again, then let out a long, theatrical sigh. Your reason, ma'am, is poetic. Jude smiled politely. Thank you, Mr. Coates. Stacy stood abruptly, tears finally real this time. Anger, not sorrow. You can't let her do this. We'll be on the street. Darnell gave her a look that could freeze asphalt. Ma'am, I suggest you start packing. This isn't a Hallmark special. It's property law. And frankly, this might be the most justified eviction I've seen all year. He picked up his gavel, gave it one sharp tap. Case dismissed. Eviction stands. Stacy's chair scraped back hard enough to screech. She shoved it aside as she stormed out, the legs clattering against the tile. Mark followed, eyes down, shoulders sagging, as though the sound itself was too much to bear. Cynthia leaned over and whispered, "Judge said it best." Jude gathered her papers, tucking them neatly into her purse. "No, Cynthia," she said quietly. "He only said it out loud." They stood and made their way to the exit. Outside, the winter sun hit bright off the courthouse glass. Reporters weren't there, but a few familiar faces, neighbors, curious onlookers, lingered across the street. Cynthia grinned, linking arms with her. "You want lunch?" Jude shook her head, watching a family walk past, their laughter carried on the wind. "Not hungry yet," she said softly. "But I will be soon." The restaurant was one of those places that looked quiet even from the outside. No neon, no chatter spilling into the street. Just the muted glow of a steakhouse window and the smell of butter and seared meat drifting into the December night. Jude held the door open for Cynthia and Pearl, the three of them shaking off the cold as they stepped inside. The hostess greeted them with a polite smile and a glance that lingered just long enough to recognize Jude's name from the courthouse docket. "Table for 3?" "Yes," Jude said, her voice calm, almost light. "Somewhere without echoes." They were seated in a corner booth, tucked away from the bar and the low murmur of couples leaning in over wine. A single candle flickered between them, its reflection caught in Pearl's glasses as she unfolded her napkin. "Well," Cynthia said, picking up her menu, "how's it feel to win the world's most awkward courtroom family reunion?" Jude smiled faintly. "Strangely peaceful." "Peaceful?" Pearl chuckled. "Honey, you just turned your own son's Christmas into a moving sale." "I gave him 30 days' notice," Jude said evenly. "It's more grace than I was given." Cynthia raised her glass of red wine. "To peace, then, the earned kind." They clinked glasses softly. No speeches, no forced gratitude, no pretending. Just three women who'd seen enough of life to know when quiet meant victory. When the food came, it came without ceremony. Warm bread, butter that melted on contact, and thick steaks cooked just right. Jude cut hers slowly, savoring every bite. For once, the sound of forks scraping plates wasn't grating. It was grounding. "I can't remember the last time I ate a meal without a performance," she said. Cynthia smirked. "You mean, without someone announcing how thankful they are while undermining you in the same breath?" Jude laughed, a real one this time, low and soft. "Exactly that." They ate in contented silence for a while, the candle flickering between them. Then Cynthia leaned in, phone in hand. "Speaking of peace, you've got 8 new applicants for the house already. Word travels fast when a property that pretty hits the grapevine." Jude didn't look up from her plate. "Not yet." Cynthia frowned. "Not yet what?" "Not until I walk through it alone," Jude said. "Every room, every drawer. I need to feel it empty before I let someone else fill it." Pearl nodded. "Closure." "Respect," Jude corrected. "Houses hold memory. I want mine back before anyone else makes theirs." Her phone buzzed against the table. She hesitated, expecting another relative's voicemail, but the name that lit up the screen made her expression soften. Ruby. Still screaming. Jude's thumb hovered for a second before she typed back. "Jude. Keep your earplugs in. and your options open. A typing bubble appeared, then disappeared. Finally, Ruby's reply blinked onto the screen. Ruby. Okay, Grandma. Jude smiled faintly and slipped the phone back into her purse. Cynthia and Pearl exchanged a look, but didn't press. Some things didn't need narration. Dessert? The waiter asked gently, setting down a small menu. Jude shook her head. I've had enough sweetness for 1 year. When the bill came, she reached for it before either of the others could move. My treat, she said firmly. Consider it a victory dinner. Cynthia grinned. Then next time, I'm buying champagne for the lock change. Next time, Jude said with a small smile, it won't be about locks. It'll be about keys. They lingered for a few more minutes, finishing the last sips of their drinks until the waiter dimmed the lights a little further. Outside, the street lamps had fog halos. As they walked to their cars, the air smelled like snow again. Jude paused by her sedan, looking up at the faint white breath of clouds spreading over the city. Her phone buzzed once more. A notification from Facebook this time. Stacy Hensley updated her status. Nothing hurts like betrayal from your own blood, but God sees everything. Cynthia, already at her car, called across the lot. You okay? Jude slipped the phone back into her pocket. Better than I've been in years. Christmas Eve arrived like it had somewhere better to be. Lexington's streets glimmered with porch lights and inflatable Santas, but at the house on Willow Bend Drive, Jude's house, the windows stayed dark. No wreath, no tree, no laughter spilling into the yard. Just the dull silhouette of boxes stacked half-heartedly in the living room. Half filled, half forgotten. Packing tape dangled from the dispenser, curling like a surrender flag. Stacy's car was still in the driveway. Mark's truck, too. Neither looked like they were going anywhere. Inside, the air felt stale, too quiet for a home that had once held so much noise. The mantel was bare except for a few stray tinsel strands that clung stubbornly to the wood, a mocking reminder of holidays past. Jude stood on the porch, envelope in hand, watching her breath bloom white in the cold. She knocked once, firmly. It was Mark who opened the door. His face looked older, or maybe just tired. The living room behind him was a mess of cardboard and excuses. Mom, he said, voice uneven. It's Christmas Eve. I know what day it is. She held out the envelope. Final reminder. Lease ends in 7 days. Mark's hand hung in the air, hesitant. Can't this wait until after Christmas? Jude shook her head. You've been waiting all year. I'm done waiting. From somewhere deeper in the house, Stacy's voice rang out, sharp as glass. You don't have to talk to her, Mark. Let the sheriff handle it. Jude sighed, stepping back. Consider this the sheriff's day off? She tucked the envelope into his hand and turned away before he could say more. The snow had started again by the time she reached her car. Soft, silent, the kind that turned every sound into a secret. When she got home, her condo was warm and bright. A small tree sparkled in the corner, simple and quiet. White lights, silver ornaments, nothing extra. She'd always preferred order to spectacle. She'd just poured herself a cup of cocoa when the doorbell rang. Ruby stood there, bundled in a red scarf, a cardboard box clutched to her chest. Frost clung to her eyelashes like glitter. Hey, Grandma, she said, breathless. Mom forgot I signed up for the gingerbread kid exchange at school, so I figured we could decorate here instead. Jude smiled, stepping aside. I'd like that very much. Ruby grinned and hurried inside, shaking off her boots. They cleared the kitchen table together, spreading out the little kit, frosting tubes, gumdrops, peppermint wheels. The smell of cinnamon sugar filled the air as they worked. Ruby hummed quietly, a Christmas song without words. Jude held the frosting bag steady while her granddaughter pressed the candy into place. When they finished, the house in front of them leaned slightly to one side, imperfect but standing. Ruby looked at it proudly. It's not straight. Jude smiled. Neither is life, but it holds together with enough icing. Ruby laughed, her eyes bright. You sound like a quote on a mug. Maybe I'll make one. For a moment, the world outside didn't exist. Not the arguments, not the notices, not the silence of the house she'd once called home. Just the two of them, the scent of sugar, and the flicker of fairy lights in the corner. Then came the knock. 3 hard, urgent raps against the door. Ruby looked up. That's Dad's knock. Jude set down the frosting bag, heart tightening. Stay here, sweetheart. She opened the door to find Mark on the porch, coat dusted with snow, panic in his eyes. Mom, we need to talk, he said. His breath came in quick, fogged bursts. It's about Ruby. Jude's chest went cold. What about Ruby? He glanced past her into the kitchen, where Ruby was still tidying the candy wrappers, oblivious. She's saying she doesn't want to live there anymore. She told her mother she wants to stay with you. Jude's pulse thudded in her ears. Did that surprise you? Mark's voice cracked. Stacy's losing it. She said if Ruby tries to leave, she'll call the police. Behind him, the snow fell harder, thickening into a white curtain. Jude looked over his shoulder toward the road, then back at him. Then you tell your wife, she said quietly, that she's welcome to try. The next morning broke gray and quiet, the kind of December morning that felt suspended between storm and stillness. The snow outside Jude's window had turned to slush, and the world seemed to be holding its breath. She sat at her kitchen table again, the one where every hard decision of her life had been made, staring at a single sheet of paper. At the top, in neat serif font, it read, Temporary Custody Agreement. It wasn't something she'd planned, but it was something she'd been ready for. Pearl had given her the number of a notary friend, a woman who'd seen her share of family implosions and didn't flinch at the words, holiday custody. Within the hour, Jude had the form downloaded, printed, and laid out beside her steaming mug of coffee. By noon, the pen inked her name, Judith Ann Hensley, Guardian. The doorbell rang at 12:17. Ruby stood there with her backpack, the straps pulled so tight they bit into her shoulders. Her face was red from crying, but her jaw was set with a determination Jude hadn't seen since Mark was 10, and decided he'd rather sleep in the barn than apologize to his father. Grandma, she whispered. Come in, baby. Ruby stepped over the threshold like she was crossing into another world. The first thing she did was drop the backpack with a soft thud, then throw her arms around Jude's waist. The girl's small body trembled, and Jude wrapped her arms around her, holding tight, not with panic, but with purpose. It's okay, Jude murmured. You're safe here. From the hallway, Pearl's voice floated in. I'll get her settled, she said softly. She'd been knitting since sunrise, a half-finished blanket draped across her arm, cream-colored and warm. She winked at Ruby. Made just your size, sugar. Ruby smiled weakly, rubbing her eyes. Thank you, Miss Pearl. While Pearl led her toward the guest room, Ruby's room, now permanent in every way that mattered, Jude's phone lit up on the counter. Stacy calling. Jude stared at it a long moment before answering. Where is she? Stacy's voice was already at a scream. Where's my daughter, Jude? She's here, Jude said evenly. And she's fine. You had no right. Stacy's fury crackled through the line. You can't just take someone's child because you're lonely. I didn't take her, Jude said. Her tone stayed measured, steady. She came to me. You're stealing my daughter. Jude's voice cooled like the first bite of frost. No, Stacy. I'm giving her what I gave you. A safe home. You just forgot how to use it. On the other end of the line, there was silence. Then a sharp, shaky exhale. You'll regret this. Maybe, Jude said. But at least I'll sleep through the night. She hung up before Stacy could say another word. Pearl reappeared in the kitchen doorway, the new blanket now folded neatly in her arms. "She's lying down," she said. "Said she doesn't want to go back until the shouting stops." Jude's throat tightened. "That may take a while." Cynthia arrived an hour later, cheeks red from the cold, paperwork tucked under her arm. "Brought the official notice," she said. "Lock change scheduled for the 1st. They're out of appeals." Jude took the envelope, setting it next to the custody letter. 2 documents, side by side. One ending something, one beginning something else. Cynthia poured herself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. "How's Ruby holding up?" "She's sleeping," Jude said. "Finally." Cynthia nodded toward the folded blanket. "You're doing the right thing, you know." "I know." Jude's voice was quiet, certain. But right things still weigh heavy. They stood in silence for a while, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. From the next room came the faint rustle of bedsheets, the sound of a child exhaling into rest for the first time in days. Pearl picked up her knitting again, the rhythmic click of needles steady and soothing. Cynthia tapped her pen against the countertop, scanning the papers. "So, what's next?" Jude looked toward the closed door of Ruby's room, where soft light from the window the morning of January 1st broke cold and clean. The kind of blue-gray dawn that made the world look like it had been erased and redrawn. Frost glittered on every mailbox. The streets were empty except for Jude's silver sedan idling at the curb of Willow Bend Drive. She turned off the engine and sat for a long moment, watching the house. Her house. The one that had once been her pride, then her humiliation, and now, somehow, her reclamation. Cynthia's SUV pulled in behind her, headlights cutting through the pale morning mist. A man in a flannel jacket stepped out from the passenger seat, toolbox in hand. "Morning, Mrs. Hensley," the locksmith said, his breath steaming in the air. "Happy New Year." "It will be," Jude replied. Cynthia came around to her side, rubbing her gloved hands together. "Ready?" Jude looked at the front door. The same one she'd once opened to birthday parties, bake sales, and betrayals. "Let's find out." The 3 of them walked up the path, boots crunching on the icy walkway. When Jude slipped the old key into the lock, it turned smoothly, almost too easily. Inside, the house was still. No voices, no boxes, no sign of chaos or resistance. It was clean. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and cold air, like someone had tried to erase themselves. "They're gone," Cynthia said quietly, scanning the living room. Jude stepped inside, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood. Every echo felt like a ghost leaving. The furniture was gone, the walls, bare, but she could still see it all. The Thanksgiving table, the laughter that wasn't hers, the plastic tray. "Quiet suits it," she said. They moved through the house slowly. The master bedroom was empty except for a single nail still sticking out of the wall. The kids' room, stripped to blank walls and a stray crayon on the floor. Jude picked it up, turning it in her palm. Sky blue. In the kitchen, the counters gleamed. The refrigerator had been wiped clean, a single note magneted to the door in Mark's handwriting. "We'll send for the rest later. Please take care of Ruby." Jude traced the ink with her fingertip. He did one thing right. Cynthia reached into her purse and handed her a small white candle. "You said you wanted to leave something behind." Jude nodded, setting it gently on the counter. She struck a match, the flame catching with a whisper. "Start fresh," she murmured. The candlelight flickered, warm against the cold metal sink. It was the only light in the house now. The locksmith cleared his throat. "Ma'am, you ready for the change?" "Yes," Jude said, stepping back. "Do it." The man got to work, the rhythmic sound of his tools filling the air, metal scraping, bolts clicking, something being undone and remade. It was almost musical. Cynthia watched her quietly. How's it feel? Like closing a door I should have locked years ago. When the locksmith finished, he handed Jude 2 new brass keys, gleaming and cold in her palm. All set. Ma'am. New locks, deadbolt included. She turned one key over in her hand, its edges sharp and certain. Thank you. He nodded, tipped his cap, and left, his boots thudding down the porch steps. Cynthia exhaled. Well, she said, smiling softly, you didn't burn it down. You just flipped the lease. Jude laughed quietly, a sound more relief than humor. That's one way to put it. From outside came the crunch of smaller footsteps. A knock followed. Soft, polite, familiar. Ruby peeked through the glass, bundled in her puffy jacket, her cheeks pink from the cold. She carried a cardboard box almost as big as she was. Morning, Grandma, she called. Dad said you might need help. Jude opened the door, warmth spilling out into the chill. Always could use your help, sweetheart. Ruby stepped inside, setting the box down carefully. It's some of your old books. Mom said they were yours, so I wanted to bring them back. Jude crouched beside her, brushing a hand over the box. Inside were her classics: Steinbeck, Morrison, Frost. Her name still written in neat pen on the inside covers. Thank you, baby. Ruby smiled. Can I light the candle? Jude nodded, and Ruby leaned forward, watching the small flame dance. It smells nice, the girl whispered. Clean, Jude said. Like new beginnings. Cynthia checked her watch. We'll head out soon. Let you two have your moment. But Jude barely heard her. She was staring at the kitchen window, at the reflection of herself and Ruby standing together in the morning light. 2 generations, framed by peace. 2 weeks later, Lexington thawed beneath a pale sun. The snow had turned to glassy puddles in the gutters, and Jude's front porch smelled faintly of damp earth and clean wood, the scent of a new year beginning to trust itself. Inside, she stood over the open box in her kitchen, the one she'd labeled in black marker. Leftovers. Not food that had long been eaten or tossed, but relics. Plastic plates, rainbow napkins, a stack of children's trays with fading cartoon prints, the same kind she'd been served on Thanksgiving. Ruby knelt on the floor beside her, rolling the last tray in a sheet of newspaper. You sure you don't want to keep one, Grandma? For, like, memories? Jude shook her head, smiling faintly. No, sweetheart. They're too small for me. She paused, tucking the tray into the box. But not for someone who matters. Ruby tilted her head. You mean for kids? For women starting over, Jude said softly. And the kids who go with them. The shelter uses donated dishware for their family apartments. Makes things feel a little less temporary. Ruby nodded, eyes serious beyond her years. Like when you helped Mom move in here before? Jude's smile flickered, tender but firm. Different reason, same idea. They worked in quiet harmony, newspaper rustling and tape peeling in strips. Every tray felt lighter as it left her hands, as though she was boxing up a season of herself she no longer needed to hold on to. When they'd finished, Ruby stood, brushing her hands on her jeans. What happens next? Jude sealed the box shut. We deliver peace where it's needed. The women's shelter sat across town. A plain red brick building with white trim and a garden that someone had tried their best to keep alive through winter. Inside, the scent of cinnamon tea and clean laundry filled the air. A volunteer met them at the door. A woman about Jude's age, her hair tucked beneath a knitted cap. Donation drop-off? Jude nodded, and Ruby helped carry the box to the reception counter. The woman smiled, opening it gently. These are adorable. Perfect for the family kitchen unit. The kids will love them. Ruby grinned, proud. My grandma said they're too small for her. The volunteer laughed softly. Well, they'll fit just right here. As they turned to leave, Jude noticed a little boy peeking from behind a doorway. Maybe 6, maybe 7, holding a toy truck missing one wheel. He gave her a small wave. Jude waved back. The gesture caught her off guard. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. In that moment, she thought of the tray, of the way humiliation had once felt heavy in her hands, and realized it had turned into something else entirely. They drove home in silence, Ruby humming along with the car radio. When they reached the house, Jude's porch was already glowing in the soft amber of the late afternoon sun. I like it here, Ruby said as they unloaded their coats. It feels like the air doesn't yell. Jude smiled. That's how you know it's home. While Ruby curled up with a book, Jude went to her desk. The light was gold and low, falling across a stack of crisp papers. Her lawyer had emailed them that morning. Will and estate update. Review pending. She took out her reading glasses and began to sign where the yellow stickers told her to. Primary heir. Ruby, Grace Hensley. Each stroke of the pen felt less like a transaction and more like a vow. When she finished, she pressed the pen down firmly and whispered, "It's yours now, kiddo. Not the house. The peace." From outside, the faint hum of an engine drifted in. Jude glanced through the curtain. A car idled across the street. White, polished, familiar. Stacy's. Jude didn't move at first. She just stood there watching as Stacy's window rolled halfway down. The woman's face was barely visible behind dark sunglasses. She looked toward the house, not long enough to be brave, but long enough to ache. Then the window slid back up, and the car rolled away. No wave, no horn, just the hum of retreat. Jude turned from the window, exhaling. Some distances didn't need closing. She stepped out onto the porch, watering can in hand, and tilted it toward the pots by the railing. The soil drank greedily, and tiny green shoots peeked through where the frost had once bitten hard. Behind her, Ruby appeared in the doorway. "Grandma, it's getting dark. You coming in?" "In a minute," Jude said, setting the can aside. The wind was soft now, brushing the chimes on the porch into a slow, gentle song. The morning light spilled through the wide kitchen windows, warm and steady. The first real light of a new chapter. Outside, frost clung to the grass in delicate lace, but inside Jude's home, the air was golden and alive with the scent of coffee, butter, and something sweet baking in the oven. It was quiet, but not empty. The kind of quiet that hummed with belonging. On the long oak table, polished, simple, and hers again, sat 4 plates. Real china. Silverware that clinked instead of snapped. A linen table runner instead of a vinyl one with cartoon turkeys. Jude poured orange juice into glass tumblers, while Ruby arranged napkins folded into triangles, proud of her precision. Pearl hummed at the stove, flipping pancakes with the ease of a woman who'd survived her own wars, while Cynthia was at the counter, slicing strawberries and sneaking a few into her mouth when she thought no one was looking. Jude caught her. "I saw that." Cynthia grinned. "Consider it quality control." Jude shook her head, smiling. "You've been saying that since 1982. "Consistency is a virtue," Pearl said, sliding a stack of golden pancakes onto a plate. The laughter that followed was soft, real, the kind that didn't echo off tension. It stayed close, familiar. When everything was set, Ruby looked up expectantly. "Where should I sit?" Jude gestured toward the seat beside her, not at the far end, not at the corner, but next to the head of the table. "Right there, sweetheart." "And you?" Ruby asked. Jude glanced at the chair at the table's head. Her chair, the one that had sat empty last Thanksgiving while she'd been exiled to the kids' corner. She ran a hand over its curved back, feeling the smooth wood beneath her fingertips. "I think I'll take my place," she said softly. Everyone settled in. The sound of forks on real plates filled the room like music. Bacon crackled, coffee poured, steam curled up in little ribbons catching the sunlight. For the first time in years, Jude ate without performing. No strained smiles, no waiting for someone to grant her permission to feel proud of her own home. Just the rhythm of conversation, the scent of maple syrup, and Ruby's easy laughter floating above it all. Halfway through breakfast, Ruby reached across the table and touched her grandmother's hand. "Grandma." "Yes, baby?" Ruby tilted her head, studying her. "You don't feel like background anymore." The table fell quiet, the sentence hanging there like sunlight through the curtains. Jude smiled slowly. "Because I never was." Cynthia nodded, raising her coffee mug, to never being background again. They all lifted their glasses and mugs. No clinking for show, no speeches, just quiet acknowledgement. When the plates were cleared, Ruby wandered into the hallway, curious. She stopped in front of the framed document hanging there. The property title, freshly sealed and officially transferred back under Jude's sole ownership. The gold frame gleamed softly in the light. "Is this it?" Ruby called out. Jude joined her, drying her hands on a towel. "That's it." Ruby leaned in, reading the embossed lettering, her voice proud. "Judith A. Hensley, sole owner." "That's right," Jude said. "Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it?" "It sounds like freedom," Ruby said. Jude's eyes softened. "It is." From the kitchen, Pearl called out, "We saved you a pancake, Ruby, but if you don't come fast, Cynthia's gonna steal it." Ruby laughed and ran back, ponytail bouncing. Jude lingered in the hallway for a moment, alone with the framed title and the faint reflection of herself in the glass. Her reflection didn't look older or smaller anymore. It looked centered. The woman she'd been all along, standing exactly where she belonged. She walked back to the kitchen, where the table was still messy with syrup stains and crumbs. Beautiful, imperfect proof of life happening in peace. Ruby was pouring more syrup onto her pancake while Pearl and Cynthia debated whether real butter was a moral necessity. Jude sat down again, her chair creaking softly beneath her. The smell of pancakes and coffee lingered. So did the feeling of earned stillness. She looked at her friends, at her granddaughter, at the sunlight pooling across the table, and let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for months. "Everything okay, Grandma?" Ruby asked. Jude smiled, reaching for her coffee. "Everything's just fine." A silence fell, not heavy, not awkward, the kind of silence that fills a home when it finally belongs to itself again. Jude looked around the table, at the life she'd rebuilt from something small and humiliating into something steady and whole. Her voice was calm but carried enough weight to settle the air. "At Thanksgiving," she said, "they served me a kid's meal, so I served the table my resignation as their landlord." Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees, rustling the last of the dead leaves. Inside, the candle on the counter flickered once and steadied, its light constant, quiet, and entirely her own.